Good night. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. This is Rickford Burke here in New York. Good night to all of you. Text me, let me know where you're watching from. Thank you for joining the program. Very important program tonight. We have a lot of information for you. So keep sharing the link. Everybody, you know the drill. Share the link. Wherever you're watching from, whether it's Europe, in Guyana, the Caribbean, Asia, Africa, here in North America, specifically the United States, share the link. Good night. I hope you're having a good night. Tonight, we have some big development stories. Uh, the deepening crisis in the Guyana Police Force. Share the link. Share the link to everyone. We'll be talking to Nigel Hughes, attorney for Sergeant Dion Bascom, and we'll be discussing the latest developments in the police fiasco, the police criminal investigations fiasco. Share the link, and we'll be right back in 60 seconds. All right, good night. Welcome back. Keep sharing the link, everybody. Keep sharing the link. Well, you know, the topic tonight is about, again, the deepening fiasco in the Guyana Police Force. This matter originated with Sergeant Bascom coming forward since in February. Information now becoming public about corruption at the Guyana Police Force, particularly the obstruction of the Paper Shorts murder. And as you know, Paper Shorts, Mr. Fagundes was murdered in front of Palm Court last year. And so the murder investigation commenced, and it has been stalled since then. Sergeant Bascom came forward last week accusing top member of the Guyana Police Force and head of the Major Crimes Unit at the Criminal Investigations Department, CID, Superintendent Mitchell Caesar of corruption. The sergeant said that he was told that Mr. Caesar collected $30 million as bribe to cover up this case. It's not the first time Mr. Caesar has faced controversy. In 2018, he was accused of taking $5 million bribe to cover up the Jason DeFlorment murder. Jason DeFlorment was allegedly murdered by Ernie Bacchus in Sobrianville, at the Sobrianville Hotel, sometime in 2015, I think, 2018. So controversy continues. In response to the accusations by Sergeant Bascom, the Guyana Police Force held a press conference led by Police Commissioner Clifford Hicken and Crime Chief Wendell Blanham, who's an Assistant Commissioner of Police. And they attempted to refute the allegations made by Sergeant Dion Bascom by attacking Sergeant Bascom and attempting to impeach him and prove that he was untrustworthy, he's a corrupt cop, he's involved in criminal activity, he's lying, etc. Mind you, Sergeant Bascom was promoted 3 times within the last 2 years, from constable to corporal, from corporal to sergeant. He was promoted as late as this year, January, to sergeant of police. But the Ghana Police Force is attempting to tell us that they have known that he's been corrupt and they have promoted him. Nevertheless, the confusion continued. One of the main contentions of the Ghana Police Force is that Sergeant Bascom lied when he said he turned in then wanted man Randall Backus. The police force had issued a wanted bulletin for Mr. Backus. In connection with the Paper Shorts murder, Mr. Backus was turned in by Sergeant Bascom. He said he had called, after he learned of the bulletin, he called Sergeant Bascom and asked him to pick him up because he was familiar with the sergeant. Sergeant Bascom said he picked him up and took him to CJID headquarters, and later his attorney joined. Subsequent to Mr. Bascom making that statement, as I said, the police force refuted it at a press conference, claiming no, he was not turned in. The prime chief actually called him a liar and said that it was the attorney, Mr. Damien De Silva, who had turned him in. Mr. Backus was then interviewed by Travis Chase, and he confirmed, yes, he did call Sergeant Dion Bascom, and Sergeant Bascom took him in. He was later joined by his attorney at CID. His attorney, Mr. Damien De Silva, later confirmed in a video that he went there and met him, and that Mr. Backus had called him to say he was on his way at CID headquarters in answer to the wanted bulletin. So the police force was exposed as lying as a result of what Mr. Backus said, and they face widespread condemnation from members of the society and from the citizenry. So now, in an attempt to resuscitate its image, the police force has allegedly forced or coerced Mr. Backus to change his story. He's done a complete 360, and he's now accusing Sergeant Bascom of being corrupt and denying that Sergeant Bascom turned him in. It appears as though the police force wants to make the whole situation so murky that the citizens cannot discern truth from lie, fact from fiction. Here are a few videos that will paint the picture.
For Randall Backus, and 1 hour later, he turned himself in with his attorney at law, and not that a wanted bulletin was issued on the 6th of April 2021 for Randall Backus, and 1 hour later, he turned himself in with his attorney at law, and not in company of Mr. Dion Bascom, as he was seen misleading the public during his Facebook Live. The police station diary at the Criminal Investigation Department also confirms that Mr. Bascom is being untruthful. Conclusion: based on the foregoing, Dion Bascom's claim that he brought Randall Backus to the police is a deliberate falsehood and malicious in nature. And you're not only getting information from the police, you have the information there, the clippings from Kaiju News.
When I learned of the wanted bulletin issue for me, the first person I jump on my phone and call is my attorney, Damien De Silva. That is the first person I call and tell him that I'm going down at Ifleary. With or without him, I'm going there.
Right.
You understand? Then afterwards, I jump on the phone again and I call Bascom.
Who Bascom?
Officer Bascom.
Dion Bascom?
Dion Bascom.
Right.
I call him and say, watch, a bulletin issue for me. And he come and he pick me up and we go in there.
So Bascom took you into police?
Bascom took me in, and shortly after, my attorney, Damien De Silva, arrived there.
Where did Bascom pick it from?
Bascom picked me up from a house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And took you in too?
And took me in.
Right. So how is it that the police is saying that it was your lawyer who turned you in?
My lawyer did not turn me in. Mr. Damien De Silva did not turn me in, but he come shortly after. And I let him know that I'm going there. I never give him details of who I'm going there with.
Right.
Nor who is carrying me there. Mm-hmm. But I let him know that I'm going there because a bulletin issue for me.
You had difficulty accessing your client at first? No, my client, before he turned himself in, called me immediately. So I actually met him there. He was on his way already. He wasn't even waiting for me, to be honest. He said, counsel, meet me there. I'm going there now, with or without you.
You heard it. Both Mr. Bascom and his attorney confirmed that, who took it. Well, the attorney confirmed that he did not take him in. He went and met him there. Look at the demeanor in that video of Mr. Rondell Backus. He was calm, he was collected, he was deliberate, he was thinking about what he was saying, he was telling the truth. Any psychologist, anybody who knows human behavior will tell you that's his genuine belief. That's his genuine belief. Now, late yesterday, we got information that the police had planned to put out some sort of statement changing what turning someone over means to say you're only turned over when your attorney formally give you over to the police to be questioned, which is absolute nonsense because I'm not sure what they'll term when they arrest someone and take them in to the police station without an attorney, or if someone turns themselves in that doesn't have an attorney. What would you call that? Well, the police then changed its strategy and asked Mr. As a matter of fact, we heard first Mr. Backus now to turn against Mr. Bascom and to now change his story completely to say, no, it was not Mr. Bascom who turned me in. Listen to this. Not sure if you're hearing there, but oh.
Such as Sergeant Bascom. Sergeant Bascom was a regular visitor farmer for anyone, much less a corrupted cop such as Sergeant Bascom. Sergeant Bascom was a regular visitor at my home, whereby he would join me for a meal and he would sit down and tell me certain illegal things, what he was doing while he was conducting his duty as a police officer. I did call Sergeant Bascom to take me to Ivlery because a bulletin was issued for me, but it's my lawyer that present me to CID and stood by my side right through all the time. I am very angry, Sergeant Bascom, labeling me as an informer because I would never be an informer for you nor nobody, knowing the things that you's be going on with as a police officer. I am very angry, Sergeant Bascom, calling me an informer because I'm not an informer for he nor anybody else. I am doing this Facebook post because I feel the truth must be heard because Bascom is a very corrupted cop. I'm an ex-prisoner, I'm not no stranger to the police, and now I'm living a good life. I was released from prison in 2019 for good behavior. I am really annoyed over the last week Sergeant Bascom is trying to
Okay. And then late this afternoon, and by the way, let me make an observation there. That was not a live video. That was a video shot by somebody. You could see several parts of it edited. Who shot the video? I'm told the police. But let's go to the other video. Late this afternoon, he made a video with Big Smith News. Let me see if I can pull that video up before I ask Mr. Hughes to comment.
My name is Levi Smith, and we will be speaking with Mr. Rondell Backus. Rondell Backus is no stranger to the media and to the members of the public. He has reached out to Big Smith News Watch to share some information with us that he considers important to himself and to an ongoing police investigation. Mr. Bacchus, welcome to Big Smith News.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
All right, so why are you here?
Boss,
Why did you reach out to Big Smith News
the
Watch
reason
in the first place? Because we've seen you elsewhere over the last few days. So why are you here today? Why are you at us?
I was arrested for an incident that happened, right? And the police locked me up. Now, at the end of the day, the police got a work for do.
And is this the same issue with the
With the
model
paper shots
paper?
investigation.
Okay.
Yes, I was arrested for the paper shots investigation. At the end of the day, the police got a work for do. I was locked up for 3 days, right? A police sergeant by the name of Mr. Bascom would have taken me,
What Bascom?
Dion Bascom, right? He would have taken me to Ifleary, right? Shortly after, my lawyer, Damien De Silva, arrived and presented me to CID ranks at Ifleary. I would have kept at the lockups for 3 days, right? Now, at the end of the day, the police got a work for do. They got a right to run their investigation, so forth. Now, that is water under the bridge. That done passed, that done gone. I had to go through what I had to go through. Now, the other day, I don't know, visit with this particular individual. He rise up on social media, you know, and he start talking things. Now, what I'm saying, if you have a problem with who you have a problem with, that is your concern. That is not my concern. When you is going to label me as an individual that usually mix and meddle with all manner of people in the streets, the good, the bad, and the indifference, right? When you going to label me to society as one of your informant, you're claiming on social media that you recruit informers, and I am one of your informant. Now, I want to make it clear to you. I want to make it clear to the Guyanese public also.
Speak to them into the camera.
You know, I want to make it clear to you and to the Guyanese public. You know, how could I be an informant? How could I be an informant when you are not in prison?
Explain that.
All right. In a sense, I know things about you.
Levi
I know,
Smith?
not you. I know things about that individual, Bascom, and he's not in prison. So how could I be an informer?
What do you know of Mr. Bascom?
All right. Well, I know a lot of things of Mr. Bascom doings in the streets as a police officer. A lot of things.
Like?
Well, I would say bringing out narcotics from the narcotics branch at Ifleary and selling it out in the streets.
All right. Joining me now is for a response is Mr. Bascom's attorney at law Nigel Hughes. Mr. Hughes, good night. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me. This is so intriguing. Everybody share the link. This is intrigue. First of all, let me allow you to respond to what we just heard there.
Hi, good night, Rickford. Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you very clearly.
Right. Good night to you, of course, and your listeners. When you're asking me to respond, what aspect you want me to respond to, Mr.
Just respond to anything you wanted to observe. Any observation before I go into my questions. From the beginning where the crime chief made his comments, Mr. Bacchus very calmly and collectively responded saying, no, he was turned in. Twice Travis Chase asked him if he was turned in. He said, yes. No, it was not my turn. It was Mr. Bascom. Now all of a sudden he appears to be under some sort of duress or reinforced. There was a story in GNN tonight that says that the police is offering protection and they actually are offering him a stipend to now be an informant against Dion Bascom. Also, you can see in the first video that was shot, that was not a live video. It was a video that was recorded and edited. There's several segments you can see where they actually slice the video. What's your response to all of that?
Okay, I think we should again not get distracted
Okay.
from the main issue. And then the main issue was defined by the crime chief when he said categorically at the press conference that Mr. Bascom did not bring in this gentleman. He said so very clearly. Matter of fact, the entire press conference, the reason for the press conference was to respond to the various statements that had been made by Mr. Bascom. And Mr. The crime chief said, look, here is an example of why you should not believe Mr. Bascom, because he did not bring in Mr. Bacchus. That was the whole premise upon which the crime chief made the statement. Mr. Bacchus, up to today, even after he's changed his various stories and all its iterations, the one thing he is maintaining is that, one, he contacted Mr. Bascom. He hasn't changed that. Mr. Bascom never found him. Mr. Bascom didn't reach out to him. He contacted Mr. Bascom after the wanted bulletin had been issued, and it was Mr. Bascom who took him in to the police station. That he has not changed. He could change many other things, but that particular statement he's not changed. Now, that became an issue only because the crime chief says, here is an example of Mr. Bascom lying. That's the issue. Now, whether Mr. Bacchus says that he has information on conduct by Mr. Bascom that he thinks is illegal, the police can investigate that. That's like any other piece of information. But the point is that he confirms that he was brought in by Mr. Bascom. Here's why it's important. Apart from the fact that he contradicts Mr. Blanham, the crime chief, when the police issue a wanted bulletin in the history of Guyana, it essentially is a license to remove that person from the face of the earth. Because if that person is killed and shot and killed, then it was a wanted person who was shot and killed. This has been the history. If you go all the way back to Cobra and before that, they issue the bulletin. It means that no holds barred. Whenever we find you, or however we find you, and what we do to you, you are a wanted man who's taken out, and that removes a certain level of public sympathy. So clearly, Mr. Bacchus, who, as he said, is no stranger to the police, who said that he's got a history. He knew that from the time the wanted bulletin went out for a matter that was as prominent as the murder of Mr. Fagundes in front of Palm Court, that he was a target. So what does he do? He calls the one person he knows, who is his friend, and trusts, and says, boss, please come, take me to the police station. He wasn't waiting for his lawyer to take him in. He knew what that signal meant. And therefore, he called the one person he trusts, who was a police officer, to take him in. He wanted safe passage to the police station. And that's why he, in his own words, said to the lawyer, I am going, you could meet me there. Because he understands once that goes out, that's a signal. So the fact that now, and he says it repeatedly in his statements, he is upset that he was called an informer. Now, that on the street has a certain connotation. All the people that trust Mr. Bacchus, all the people who ever had any sort of transaction with Mr. Bacchus, all the people that have ever done business with him, if this police officer says, one, I took him in, and two, he's an informer, it puts a target in his back. Because people who have done business with him, whatever that business may be, now feel that he's a person who takes information to the police. So he was upset.
What do you think Sergeant Bascom meant when he said he was an informer? What does that? What is?
I don't really want to speculate as to what he meant. I mean, it's clear in the first video that Mr. Bascom gave, he was upset. He was very upset and very concerned about his life. And repeated several things that he had said. The interesting thing about what Mr. Bascom said in that first video was that he merely repeated what he had put in a statement since the 7th of February, early in the year. And that is the statement that we took this morning to the Office of Professional Responsibility. He gave a very detailed statement of all the acts of what he perceived to be irregularity in the conduct of the investigation. And he did that since February. So he couldn't in February have anticipated that the police would need this, or he was going to have release videos, etc., etc. So what unfortunately happens here is this is even more reason why we need an independent investigation. And I cannot see how the two people who have been identified by Mr. Bascom as being involved in irregular activity can still continue to be part of the investigation. It is not as if they have indicated that they have solved the crime or that they are close to solving the crime. And this is after a year and a half. So if that is not the case, and there clearly are allegations raised against them, it's difficult to understand why they would still be part of the investigating team.
Do you believe the crime chief and Mr. Mitchell Caesar should be placed on leave or removed from this investigation because of prejudice?
I don't know about going on leave. I don't know what the police procedures are, but I certainly think that they, for the sake of public confidence in the Guyana police force, they should not be part of the investigation. That is what I would say. I don't know what the police procedures are, where there are allegations of this sort against senior officers. I don't know whether they send them on leave, what they do with them. So I wouldn't even pretend to speak to their operations. What I will say, however, is that they ought not to be part of the team that is investigating this murder. Clearly, the allegations are particularly damaging.
I want to zero in on these two videos that Mr. Bacchus has made. If you notice, Mr. Bacchus has changed his story to suit what the crime chief, or attempt to suit what the crime chief said, but also he deviated from his own manner of speaking and he adopted very technical language. He said he was presented, although Mr. Bacchus took me in, I was presented to the police by my attorney. Very technical language. In your experience as a lawyer, ordinary man in the street, do they make that distinction? Do they talk like that? Do they talk about who took them to the police station as against who presented them to the police? Is that your experience?
Rickford, obviously that is not my experience, but what I will say is that Mr. Bacchus has not walked back on the fact that he, one, contacted Mr. Bascom, and two, it was Mr. Bascom that took him back. So even in his last video, whether it's the one in which he was interviewed by Mr. Smith or the one before that where he created a Facebook post and published this video, in neither of them does he say that it wasn't Mr. Bascom that took him in. What he's saying is, like you said, technical language. He was presented, but at the end of the day, he says the way in which he got to the police station was as a result of Mr. Bascom taking him there.
One of the things that he said in the video is that Mr. Bascom has made him a target, implying that Mr. Bascom has threatened him, and it seemed to all fall into a narrative that the police force wants to say that Bascom, or wants to fabricate that Bascom is dangerous, he's attacking people, he's threatening people. Has Mr. Bascom threatened anyone?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, he's a police officer. I don't know if somebody has made an allegation that I'm unaware of. So that's always a possibility. I think what Mr. Bacchus was saying was that as a result of being called an informant, automatically you become a target in the underworld because, of course, people don't trust you. And if you have information that can incriminate other people, then yes, they are not going to be happy. And of course, they probably will react in a manner in which he may be unable to deal with. But he has not said that Mr. Bascom threatened him at all. At least I've not heard him say that. What I've heard him say is that because Mr. Bascom referred to him as an informant, he became a target.
What has happened over the last couple of days has completely obliterated and destroyed the credibility of the police force, the crime chief, and the police commissioner. If they were to reach out to you to give you information about how this investigation is proceeding or a particular action they would like you to take, would you have confidence in that, and would you trust them that they will follow through on any sort of arrangements they make in this case going forward?
If I said to you, Rickford, you walk on water, would you accept that it's true? First of all, it's an impossibility. The Guyana Police Force wouldn't reach out to me. We have at best a cordial relationship, and they have not, been reluctant to make all sorts of statements. So I don't imagine that they would reach out to me. What I can certainly say, the question here is whether the public believes them and trusts them, is what their credibility is. And that's precisely why in these circumstances, you ask for outside help. You ask for people who are divorced from the circumstances to conduct an investigation. Um, you know, in a lot of places, when this happens, they either call in outside help or they call in investigators from a different part of the country. In the UK, the chief constable from Manchester would come in if there's a problem in London. And that is why, in these circumstances, we are saying, let us have the best forensic help we can get. If it comes from the United States of America, I understand that the president today said that he was calling the Regional Security RSS. Brickford? Let me just say this. The last time we had anything to do with the RSS was the Henry brothers. I mean, the
Still on
public
top.
will. And what did they do? They came in and said that the Guyana Police Force was capable of conducting an investigation and that everything was going okay with the investigation. That's all we heard from the RSS. Nothing else. So the RSS, in the eyes of the public in Guyana, have a history. They came in the Henry brothers, where the families of these two boys who had been slaughtered got the best forensic expert in the world who was prepared to come down, paid for by private funds. And all they did is came in and they said, look, I don't know if it's one or two of them, that the investigation was going okay and the Guyana Police Force was capable of solving it. So to say that the RSS is going to come again really does not inspire any confidence in the public. And what is coming and what equipment are they coming with? This Fagundes murder requires people with some real capacity, not, in the regional police force. And especially if it's one person who's coming.
It's a joke to me. I mean,
And
but I
the other thing, sorry,
understand.
if I could, the
Yeah.
president says they're coming in to assess. They're not coming in to investigate. So what are they coming to assess? Whether the Guyana Police Force is doing a good job? I mean, this is just so destructive of any confidence in the Guyana Police Force.
So basically, I heard what you said loud and clear. What would you like to see? Or what type of investigation, with what structure you like to see in this case, to both follow up on the fact that Mr. Boscombe said the investigation has been obstructed because of bribery, and also the actual murder investigation. What, speaking on behalf of Mr. Boscombe, what would he like to see in terms of the type and structure of an investigation?
I'm happy that you touched on those two issues. One is the investigation ought to come in, fresh eyes, fresh set of analysis, and you present all the evidence that has been obtained to date to those investigators, and they will conduct a fresh investigation into the murder of Mr. Fagundes. That's the first and most important thing, because everything comes from that murder. Everything else flows from that murder. So what would first have to happen is you have a team that has the forensic capacity, a team that has the investigative capacity, that is not affected by any analysis that is already conducted by the Guyana Police Force that comes in, and they look at the evidence objectively, fresh eyes, and they pursue the leads that are disclosed. So that's the mother of all the investigations. The second one, which flows out of the Fagundes murder, is you want an investigation into the allegations that have been made by Mr. Bascom. So Mr. Bascom has been very specific about certain acts and omissions that have been intended to frustrate the investigation into the Fagundes murder. So that's secondary part of the investigation, is to look at what he has contended, and look for the evidence that either supports or destroys what he has contended. And if it is that the investigation was indeed compromised as a result of acts or omissions, then they put up a report, and then, of course, it's for the state to decide what it wants to do. But at the end of the day, you don't want somebody coming in and working with the two principal investigators who have been involved and who have been accused of certain acts. I don't see how they could possibly be involved in that. This new, fresh set of investigators, and I dare say, I don't believe that there's the appropriate forensic capacity anywhere in the Caribbean. We have to face some basic facts. This really requires a far more competent team coming from a country that has both the human resource capacity as well as the forensic capacity to conduct an investigation. They will look at the evidence. They will come up with their own interpretations of what has happened.
Has the president responded to you as yet? You, in a letter, outlined the danger to the life and well-being of Sergeant Bascom. The president went to Trinidad, did his thing, came back, has not. Has he responded? He's responded in the press to their questions about the investigation. Has he responded based on the Public Disclosures Act in terms of the request for protection?
The short answer to that is no. The president has not responded to me. Or as far as I'm aware, he has not responded to Mr. Bascom. And of course, as you know, and you just said, the concern was for the safety and for witness protection for Mr. Bascom and for the investigations that we've just referred to. No, we have not heard from him.
That has a lot of implications. I would call that reckless. You have a government, a president, who, as far as I'm concerned, the public might think is shielding the people at CID, who he brought back after several allegations of even criminality against them. They were removed. He brought them back. And he's not acting now to protect someone who's made allegations against them. What is the message he's sending? Or how are you interpreting the no action so far?
I was going to say, I'm happy you didn't ask me what's the message he's sending, because, of course, only the president knows what message he wants to send.
Right, that's why I changed the question.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think it is clear, what a possible interpretation of what the president's actions. I mean, you have a citizen who very publicly made allegations against people who were superior to him in law enforcement. He said that his life was in danger. He came to an attorney. The attorney set out the statutory framework, asked for the president's protection as afforded under the act, and says, look, I'm concerned every single time I am invited to comment on this. I can't help but say that Mr. Bascom's life is in danger. The response of the police was to say, go to the OPR. We've done that. Mr. Bascom this afternoon reported for duty in Essequibo and at Anna Regina this afternoon. So he's done what he has done, and the president, to whom we appealed, has not responded. He has said he's going to ask for some regional security, but he has not responded to me to perhaps the most important aspect of this entire unfortunate episode, which is to preserve and protect the life of Mr. Bascom, who is still a serving member of the Guyana Police Force. That I think is most frightening. Mr. Bascom.
Categorically.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you think the president's delay in responding to you and putting those arrangements in place based on the law is further endangering Sergeant Bascom's life?
I think Mr. Bascom's life is endangered by the second, with or without the president's action. I mean, there's a lot of motivation for people not to have him around. That motivation doesn't decrease as a result of the non-response to the president. I think the contrary is perhaps the situation.
Do you think the law probably needs to be changed so that that decision doesn't rest with a politician who might have political interest to protect persons whom allegations are made against?
Well, I think the first thing about the law is aspects of that act have to be brought into effect. So we need a protected disclosure commission. We have written to Minister Ben saying, please, as fast as possible, set up the commission, because the commission has a responsibility to protect witnesses who come forward and blow the whistle. That was the specific purpose of the legislation, and that has not been done. So I don't even want to get to the stage of changing the law where they have not even attempted to implement the law, which is establish the commission. Fortunately, the commission doesn't have to be established for what we've asked the president to do, because the section that we wrote to the president on says that once it's a matter of national security, the president has to act, have a commission. And of course, we said, look, we need protection. So before advocating for a change in the law, I would certainly suggest that the minister, as quickly as possible, set up the commission. We have invited the minister to do that. And in the absence of any concerted attempt by him, I think proceedings will flow to ensure that we get the commission that was intended under this piece of legislation since 2018.
Let me be a little more technical. You specifically said that the section under which you wrote to the president seeking the that law be invoked specifically deals with matters of national security, and
That's
it would
correct.
seem to me that the law leaves up to the discretion and the deliberate judgment of the president to determine what comes under the category of national security. How can that be interpreted? Is it the
Well,
fact that someone is saying that my life is threatened and this is a National Security Act, or is it the president's judgment and his determination to determine whether or not this falls within that category and then to grant it?
okay, so national security is not defined in the act, but we, in our letter to the president, identified why we think it should be categorized as national security. One, this is an event that involved very high-powered weaponry, less than 80 yards away from the president's residence. It happened in the center of the city of Georgetown. Georgetown is now an international city. You know, it happened at a place where patrons of foreign governments go to relax, Palm Court. It was a matter of considerable notoriety, and the persons who were involved in or associated with this event are not unknown to the police, and they have a certain notoriety. Um, as a result of the ability of the persons who perpetrated this act to escape completely undeterred by the police and drive some 20 plus miles outside of the city without any form of a roadblock after they had committed this act in the vicinity of the president's residence, must be national security, because it means that if these guys had the weaponry they had and they shot up the president's house, they would be able to get 26 miles away, burn up a car before the Guyana police force reacted. Just think about it. If instead of Palm Court, they had shot up the president's residence, and and they have high-powered rifles, they did that, they would have been able to leave that location after having shot up the president's residence and drive for 20 something miles out of the city without one single act of intervention by the Guyana police force, destroy evidence, i.e. the getaway car, and the Guyana police force did not act. I think that's a matter of national security. If I was the president, I would be very concerned that somebody can do
You're
this with this proximity to where I am sleeping with my wife and young child, and the Guyana police force are unable to react at any stage to even attempt to intervene. That to me is a matter of national security, because it means his security, his national security, is unable to react before somebody can drive 20 something miles away, destroy the evidence, And the Lord knows what else they could have done. We don't know where they were. And that must be a problem.
But Nigel, you're making my point. So this matter happened since last year. All along, this matter has not been, as far as we know, publicly. The government has not expressed concern that what you just say occurred. Somebody shot up someone with high-powered rifles right in the vicinity of the president's home. Given the fact that what happened in Haiti just recently, the government seemed unbothered. So I'm saying then maybe the act should describe national security. I'm just thinking that the whole law and the fact that it has not been fully brought into effect
Okay.
seem to be misconceived or needs strengthening or something, because nothing is happening under the act.
Well, I have if the president had responded and said this was not a matter of national security, at least we know that he arrived at a position. We have nothing from the president. So I don't even want to attribute to him the fact that he has ruled out national security. But I mean, you live in perhaps the most powerful country in the world, but just think about it. Whether somebody shot up outside at 10 Downing Street, whether somebody shot out close to the Elysee Palace, whether somebody shot up, you pick your country. If somebody was in the savannah in Trinidad and Tobago and shot up in front of the president's residence, just round the corner from the Hilton Hotel, wouldn't that be a man? And then was able to drive all the way to Tobago without getting caught, and you don't have a national security issue? Come on. I mean, the Demerara River is less than 200 yards from the president. If those people shot up the president's residence, went literally straight down that street, I can't remember the name, went to the Demerara River, got into a boat and escaped, you don't have a national security issue? Come on, we got to be real here. And I mean, certainly, if I were an ambassador of a foreign country, foreign friendly country, and this happened at a location where my citizens go for relaxation, so this happened close to the president's residence, there's a fair assumption that there'd be reasonable security, and you are completely unable to track these guys after they drive through the entire city, drive up the entire East Bank. One road up the East Bank, my friend. One road up the East Bank. They drive past how many police stations? They drive past Rumville. They drive past Providence Police Station. They drive past Grove Police Station. Diamond is further in, but they don't drive past that. And then they get to Suzdike Junction, turn in the junction, go to Swan, up the highway, and nobody, I mean, not even a horse cart with a policeman turned up. We can't be serious as a country, because if this happens with such facility, then all the citizens are in a position of real danger, which is precisely the problem we had in 2002. If the agencies which are responsible for protecting us are unable to come to our protection, then we have a crisis. You have exactly what happened in 2002. People start defending themselves. They arm themselves. They do what they got to do. You can't expect people to sit down and be targets and not react.
If the president were watching tonight, what would you say to him? In terms of...
Brickford, my mother always told me always to be polite and not presumptuous. I cannot presume to advise the president. It would be very presumptuous of me to tell the president what to do. If the president were, so desperate that he might have needed my advice and invited my advice, then that'd be a different thing. But it's not for me to tell the president what to do.
Not advice, in terms of advocacy for justice for your client.
Well, I mean, I don't think I've been particularly articulate, and I understand that people may have missed what I've been trying to say repeatedly for the last week. And so I apologize for my inability to be clear, but I would only say, Mr. President, this citizen has reached out to you about the really desperate circumstances in which he finds himself because he has exposed people who are above him. And there's a law in the land that says that certain acts and actions should follow, and all we're doing is asking you to follow that. We're not saying to please find that we are an angel. What we're saying is please have an independent investigation, because I know it could not be in your interest not to solve this murder.
I'm just seeing we have a lot of people watching. Over 24,000 people are watching. I've just seen someone in
Rickford,
the inbox.
can I be malicious?
Yes,
I hope your mathematics is better than mine, because nobody
it's
believes
very
my
well. This is
mathematics.
automatic. I'm looking at the control between 3 Facebook pages and YouTube. We have 24,000
Okay.
people. Are you acknowledging your master back?
No, no,
But
no. That penny took a long time to land for you. No, I stand by what I said about that, but that's a different discussion for a different time. Half plus one is half plus one, my friend. It doesn't change. But anyway, we'll have that discussion another time.
I like that one. I like that one. But someone inboxed me here, who apparently is a police officer, and the person saying it's scary, the fact that you can come forward to report wrongdoing and you're being treated this way. It's scary. That's what this person's saying. As a member of the force, it's scary. I'm reading that. Now, let me ask you this. What should people do? And you're a defense lawyer. What should people do if they're charged by the CID and they're innocent and they feel that they have been framed? What should people do? Like, where do they go for recourse and justice? Or they just submit themselves to the mercies of alleged corrupt officers or people who don't tell the truth clearly, like Crime Chief Blanham and persons who have been accused of being corrupt, including Superintendent Caesar?
I think the message, as you started off with this interview, the message is clear. Let me put it this way. The fact that the president has not responded as yet, the fact that the Guyana Police Force thought it was appropriate not to address the fact that they had failed to solve this crime, but preferred to have gone after a serving member of the police force merely to discredit him and not to speak to their inabilities, is a clear message to anybody else who wants to be a whistleblower. It means that that legislation is dead in its boots, because the whole point behind the legislation, any whistleblowing legislation, is that practices and actions that are corrupt, that clearly have an intent that is not good, when you expose them, then you take what you get. You don't get protection. Your life is in danger. Your family is in danger. You have to be running around, looking over your shoulder, trying to protect yourself merely for doing what the act says you should do, which is blow the whistle. So I think it is very clear, and this is why it is most unfortunate, that the consequence of the actions of the Guyana Police Force and the consequence of the, to date, lack of action by the president literally emboldens the people who are in power in the various institutions, who have conducted unorthodox acts and irregularities, that, look, this is impunity. You continue to do what you want because there is no consequence. And even where they have established legislation to expose corruption, you can't get the benefit of that because it is not going to be acted upon. I think that message is very, very clear. So when you ask me if another police officer who knows somebody is framed, because you will remember, I think Mr. Bascom in one of his interviews said, 2 or 3 occasions he actually brought evidence to the police to show that they had the wrong person. I mean, if no, let me say if I'm in the Minister Home first. If somebody did that, it means that the system itself, the investigative system, is not working because somebody brought and charged someone who clearly was not responsible for the offense. That's a frightening thing. That person only got saved because Bascom intervened. How many more people like that are in the system?
That's my question. That's my question.
Like that are in the system?
If the crime chief can so boldly lie, and this is not misleading, this is lying. He is clearly lying. He said the station diary said that the attorney, which is not true. From the time he said that, dozens of cops were all over the place saying he's lying. So,
have you asked him whether he wants to do a lie detector test?
I'm challenging him to do one. Apparently, he did one before. Now, I want to just zero in on what you said. Sergeant Bascom said that there are instances where someone was sitting in jail. I noticed the crime chief did not challenge that. Sitting in jail wrongfully for murder. For murder. This is the termination of somebody's life for murder. and he had to do investigations and bring the evidence forward, and the person was released based on that evidence. How did this get through the magistrate's court? How did it pass that to the high court? Because murders aren't tried in the magistrate's court. How did that happen? And if a jury believed the evidence, meaning somebody brought something, you can see that the police is capable of doing a lot of stuff. Look what Ronald Bacchus is doing. So if they took some previous fingerprint and presented as evidence in a case subsequently, or call somebody and say, I'm forcing you to say that you saw Rick Van Berg at a certain place committing a certain crime, and you present that. How do I overcome that? Is the justice system supposed to be really fair and ensure justice? And justice is not only to ensure accountability for someone who commits an act. Justice also means that people who are unfairly accused should be freed. So how do I get justice if these people frame me?
Well, you know, the legal system doesn't pretend to be perfect. And the common law system and the adversarial system, which we have here and which you have in the United States, does not pretend to be perfect. You know, in the United States, there are men who have sat down in prison for years, accused of rape and murder, just because of the prejudices in your system, which DNA evidence and the current technology has proven them innocent and exonerated them. So you have that whole, all those men who, most of them are African-American men who have been accused of murder, rape, etc., etc. And it's only the technology 30, 40 years later that has allowed us to exonerate them. The problem with Guyana is no different. And because we have even less technology and less capacity, then the risk of innocent persons going all the way through the system and getting convicted is much higher. And in this case, I think Mr. Bascom specifically referred to that gentleman who got shot in Garnet Street, where they had charged somebody. You can imagine the dramatic headlines. They caught the guy because it was a particularly bad murder. I think he went to buy food in the night, and these guys came up and shot him point blank and rode off, stole his bike or something. I can't remember the details of it. And were it not, as Mr. Bascom says, for him to actually gather the same information from the informants in the street and actually find out who it is, and then they conducted the real investigation and found the evidence that was independent of what Mr. Bascom said to confirm the true identity of the persons who committed the act. Somebody would have passed through the system, and that is what would happen. That is why I think the Caribbean Court of Justice and several higher courts in the Caribbean have said that they are concerned about cases where they either only rely on a confession or where there's no independent forensic evidence. And that is a real problem. In this particular case, I mean, there's so many things Mr. Bascom said, apart from the Fagundes murder, that are problematic. Just those three examples he gave of people where he went and found evidence to say that they were involved, that demonstrated they weren't involved. What happens if you didn't have somebody like that? How many more people are in the system who have been the victim of that fate?
Nigel, I'm getting a message from a friend of mine who's a prosecutor, and she's saying that is why there should be a unit to review these cases and evidence in these cases where there's questionable conduct by the police. In other words, she's saying that's how you address issues where people claim that they're framed. There should be a unit to review these cases. And it coincides with a question I had here, excuse me, for you. Do you think now that the police has demonstrated the capacity to lie and lie to the nation blatantly without care?
Rickford, let's just put this in context.
Yes.
Senior officers of the Guyana Police Force have been caught being less than accurate. I don't want to say the entire police force lies in this case, and
Right.
I mean, to the hard-working police officers who are dedicated to their jobs, I know they're horrendously embarrassed, but I wouldn't want to say that because one of their leaders has clearly been caught out in a
Well,
position.
let me adjust that to say persons responsible for the investigation in the Guyana Police Force. One, two, or three. Some of them have
high-ranking police officers. Yeah.
Right. So do you think now that that some of these major cases should be reviewed that are currently before the court? We had it here in the Bronx where hundreds of cases had to be dismissed because it was discovered that a detective or a group of detectives just lied and manufactured evidence and forged evidence and set people up. And a lot of people, innocent people, went to jail, were arrested, convicted. And so you had hundreds of cases. The district attorney had to set up a special department to review all of these cases, and then the courts threw 100 of them out. Do you think we need a process in Guyana where now it is proven that senior officers have lied, given the allegations? Do you think we should have some sort of review of the cases that they have been involved in?
Yes, I mean, clearly there's a crying need for that, but I think even more importantly, in this particular case, it is already established that what has been done cannot be relied upon, whether as a result of compromise, whether as a result of obstruction or whatever. So yes to both. Yes, it clearly demonstrates that at the highest level of the Guyana Police Force, there is clearly an inability to distinguish between truth and lack of accuracy in what goes on. And if that is prevalent and evident as it is at the levels at which it has been disclosed in the interviews, then you have a real problem with the way in which other criminal investigations have been conducted. The problem with Guyana is of course, as it always has been, is the question of capacity. There'll be a lot of cases that need reviewing, and that's precisely why you need to call for help and assistance from overseas, because we don't have the capacity to do that here. And I shudder to think the amount of people who have passed through the system and have been wrongfully implicated and worse, convicted.
Another question with regard to, and this is, you're not only an attorney, but you're a civic leader. You were once the head of a political party.
No. And you're not gonna get away with that. I'm a
You're not
citizen.
a civic
That's
leader?
it. I'm an attorney and I'm a citizen. I am not a leader.
Okay, well, as a citizen.
And to use colloquial terms, I drink my water and mind my business, my friend.
I noticed
I'm not a civic leader. No,
you're quoting Patrice Roberts. Let me ask you this: as a citizen, do you feel confident in the CID? But if somebody breaks into your place and steals all of your files and your furniture and your computer equipment, do you feel competent? Sorry, do you feel that the CID is competent enough to do a very competent investigation?
No. I've said before, God forbid, if I'm a victim of a crime, the only reason I would report it to the Guyana Police Force would be for insurance purposes. No other reason. I'm sorry. It it is what it is.
Now that you have said that, what needs to happen in terms of reform for this division so that people can, or to restore people's confidence? Do you think the leadership should be disbanded and there should be some sort of review and then they reassemble it back in another form? What should happen to CID?
Well, I mean, I think, we first have to admit nationally we have a problem with the Guyana Police Force and its capacity to investigate. That much is clear. We have to start with admitting that problem. And then you do like you do in any other similar situation. You get the experts to tell you what would be the appropriate approach. Back in the 70s, the London flying squad was notoriously corrupt. You look at what did they do to change that? And now the British cops have a good reputation. Justifiably or not. I am sure
the street crimes unit in New York had to be disbanded.
Exactly. The street crimes unit in New York. There's a time when, 42nd Street, you had all those crimes. People would walk up to you at a bar going smoke. It changed. Whether for good or bad, it changed. And so there's no need. In Guyana, we keep thinking that we have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many examples globally where you have had police forces which have been compromised, and the entire culture was one in which it was permissive, and they have changed it. So we just need to be able to look at the models that exist and see how it is that you move from where we are today, facing the crisis that we face, and come up with a solution. That's why you have experts, that's why you have data, and that's why you have a method of analysis so that you arrive at a conclusion that best suits your problem.
As we wrap up, what is Sergeant Bascom's status in terms of the police force? Has any commander said anything to him in terms of his future or an investigation? Has he been told that he will be summoned to talk to the RSS? What is the status?
The RSS? Really? You're not serious. RSS is missing one vowel between the R and the SS, but that's a different story. Um, the, Mr. Bascom, like I said, we took
You know you're
him.
gonna make news there, right?
Me make news. I just said it's missing a vowel. You laughed, not me, my friend. Um, Mr. Bascom, as you know, we took him to the Office of Professional Responsibility this morning because publicly, nobody contacted him, but publicly they said they wanted him there. When we got there, the officer in charge said that they wanted a statement from him. So we produced a statement that he had given since February. He reported for duty at Anna Regina this afternoon. The commander apparently was away, and he's there. I have to tell you, he's absolutely petrified. As you know, in Essequibo recently, Mr. Boston got shot lying in his bed next to his wife while he was naked. So Essequibo is no stranger to the possibilities of the violence that can happen as a result of police action, and so we're not going to the president's deliberations, which have taken now perhaps a week, are not going to be, from Mr. Bascom's perspective, what something that he can safely wait or continue to wait upon. So his options are going to have to be very closely considered. And I am sure in the next couple of days, he's perhaps going to make decisions in relation to his future.
What is Mr. Bascom's response to Ronald Bacchus's accusation that he told him that the police forces resorted to? He he told me that he told him that he, it sounds so fantastic and incredible, that he told him that he seized narcotics from the narcotics unit and brought it out on the streets and sold it. So he's saying that he's allegedly admitted that he was openly he was a drug dealer. What is his response to that?
Well, first of all, I would have to investigate how it is possible, if possible at all, that the officer in charge of the narcotics squad that's responsible for keeping the narcotics would have a system that allows narcotics to be removed
And
and
sold
he
it.
not know. I mean, Mr. Bascom was never in charge of narcotics. As far as I know, he only got promoted to sergeant this year. So he had to be some corporal or constable. So I don't know that the police force have a system in which they allow their junior ranks to suddenly go into the pharmacy and pick up whatever narcotics they want and say, oh, today it's going to be cannabis, tomorrow it's going to be cocaine or lollipops or whatever, and take it out. I doubt whether they have that system. They must have, at least I believe, a more robust system. And certainly at some stage when they're doing the tallying up, they must realize that somebody went into the cookie jar and took out some cookies. But more importantly, Mr. Bacchus's allegations are so far-fetched that the police should perhaps, make him a subject of investigation. He's a person of interest because
But
he's saying that he knows.
interesting? Is that interesting that he's saying that he's not an informant, but then he's on tape, on video, being an informant because he's claiming that Bascom told him that. That's what informants do, say things.
Yeah, it's really, at the end of the day, Ghana is not a real country, and every day we seem to work overtime trying to prove to the world that we are not a real place. And this is just, it's sad. I mean, I perhaps say this with tongue in cheek, but this is just another sad indictment of the state of our country.
Are you concerned that, falling along the same lines that Mr. Bacchus came out with these extraordinary and fantastic allegations, that they will now try to frame Sergeant Bascom? Because it seems as though the gloves are off. They are, in the GNN report said that they're even paying people to dig up dirt on you. So it seems as though the gloves are off. Are you concerned that they will frame your client?
I mean, as a defense attorney, you have to discuss all options with your clients, and one of the options is clearly that they can come up with a ridiculous allegation against you, and until you discharge or disprove that allegation, it's going to be there. So yes, we have discussed all those options. It really, at the end of the day, this is for the citizens of Guyana to decide what sort of police force they want, and in the light that all that has been displayed before them, including the statements by Mr. Blanham, the entire chronology of events, if they're comfortable with this, then That's where we are. Sadly, but that's perhaps where we are.
Yeah, it seemed entirely possible because if I mean we're hearing Mr. Backus making these charges now, he could come up and say, well, yes, me and Sergeant Bascom went on a shooting and so happened and he did so. He shot 10 times with a revolver, 45 revolver, whatever, and we buried the man certain places. It could be he or anyone else that committed that crime, but now he wants to damage on instruction Sergeant Bascom so he could make those claims. Anybody could make those claims. It's a frightening time. As we wrap up, let me
You might actually get lucky. You might actually say where Monica Muse's body is and who did the crime. Anyway, that's another story.
Exactly. It's a serious thing, huh? It's a very serious thing. I listened to the full interview with Attorney at Law Damien De Silva, where he spoke about the same thing, where the police, without any investigation, just issued a wanted bulletin for Rondell Backus. And he was very clear that that is something that happens in the Guyana Police Force. So it's not far-fetched. And I'm wondering, again, I mean, I'm being repetitive here, what can somebody do in Guyana if this happens to them? I mean, what is the process that should be going through, other than hiring an attorney?
Hiring an attorney doesn't help you, my friend. It doesn't really help you. You know, it sounds frightening. It is frightening. It is what it is. I wish I could sugarcoat this and say to you it is not as bad as you have characterized it. But sadly, that's exactly where we are.
Okay, final question. I mean, the hour's late. We're running up on 11 o'clock. We should have finished at 10:30. What is your advice for future whistleblowers? How should they approach disclosing wrongdoing and corruption in the Guyana Police Force if they witness it and have personal knowledge of wrongdoing, especially criminal conduct?
You got to make a choice. You want to stay alive or you want to blow the whistle? Because that's the result of the actions that have been displayed to us by the state. We haven't heard from the president. Mr. Blanham, his conduct is clear for us all to see. And so it's clear that the intent of the whistleblowing legislation, for all intents and purposes, not effective, not intended to be effective, and the state will not protect those who blow the whistle.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for taking your time, staying up late to do this interview. I appreciate it. Good night to all of our listeners. Tune in again on Thursday night for another edition of Conversation with Rickford Burke. Good night, everybody.
Good night.